Milton and Susan were unusually progressive parents and even encouraged their children to play hooky from school occasionally so they could pursue their interests independently, hardly the norm in Dayton, Ohio in the late 19th century. A fast-growing industrial center, Dayton was the very definition of an average American town. And in spite of his upbringing, Wilbur, at age 18, had fairly average aspirations. He hoped to attend Yale and become a minister. Then an incident radically shifted the direction of his life.
He and a group of friends were playing shinny, which is sort of a street version of hockey. And Wilbur got hit in the mouth with a hockey stick and knocked all of his front teeth out. And he was a long time really recovering from that accident.
He goes from being a healthy young man, handsome, fine future, all stretched out in front of him, to what was basically an invalid. Ashamed of the way he looked, no path. This is a time when he's in his room, knowing that the life he planned for himself is never going to happen.
Though he recovered physically, Wilbur was suffering from a serious depression. At the same time, his mother was very ill and required constant care.
He was so kind to her. During the later part of her illness, she had tuberculosis, and he carried her upstairs to bed every night and did everything for her.
Wilbur spent 3 years caring for his dying mother, finding his only escape in his parents' extensive library. Eventually, his older brother inquired, "What does Will do? Is he still cook and chambermaid?" It was Orville who came to Wilbur's rescue. After high school, he started a printing business, publishing the West Side News. When Orville convinced Wilbur to join him, he succeeded in getting his older brother out of the house and out of his depression.
One of the ways that Orville differed most from Wilbur was that Orville was always very optimistic. He was always willing to press ahead.
Orville was the most easily approached of the two. Fun-loving. He was a dude as far as clothes are concerned. He just had everything just perfect.
Wilbur and Orville's younger sister Catherine had graduated from Oberlin College and was now running the household. Though Wilbur, Orville, and Catherine had an active social life, none of them seemed interested in marriage. They preferred and enjoyed each other's company. In fact, Wilbur and Orville, different in so many ways, were beginning to forge one of the most successful creative alliances in history. In 1892, the bicycle was a national craze. It was called the greatest invention of the 19th century. Orville liked to race and fancied himself a scorcher. Wilbur preferred long, slow rides in the country. Bored with the printing business, Wilbur, now 25, and Orville, 21, decided to open up a bicycle shop. Soon they were handcrafting their own, honing their innate engineering skills on this cutting-edge technology. But by the time he turned 30, Wilbur was restless. In a letter, he confessed, "The boys of the Wright family are all lacking in determination and push. None of us has as yet made particular use of the talent in which he excels other men." Then one morning, Wilbur sat down at the desk in the front parlor of 7 Hawthorne Street and composed a letter to the secretary of the Smithsonian Institution. "I believe that simple flight at least is possible to man. I am an enthusiast, but not a crank. I wish to avail myself of all that is already known, and then, if possible, add my bit. Like other Americans at the time, Wilbur had been following accounts of aviation experimenters around the world.
Americans were so pro-technology, and it was an inventive age. All kinds of new patents, new machines, new devices, from galoshes to mass-produced nails and bicycles were coming down the pike, and so there was a widespread expectation that, well, yes, automobiles are here, electric trolleys are here, airplanes must be next.
One of the most prominent names in aviation at the time was the Secretary of the Smithsonian, Samuel Langley. Using government funds, he'd been experimenting with large unmanned model airplanes powered by steam and gasoline engines. In Germany, engineer Otto Lilienthal made over 2,000 glides from a huge earth mound outside Berlin. One day in 1896, his hang glider stalled, falling 50 feet to the ground. He was killed in the crash. On his gravestone are his words, "Sacrifices must be made." Wilbur and Orville read about Langley, Lilienthal, and others in the material they received from the Smithsonian.
As the Wright brothers looked at the problem, they thought they could divide it into three pieces. You had to be able to build wings that would lift your weight off the ground and the weight of the machine. You had to have a power plant that would propel it through the air, and you had to have a way to control the machine once it was in the air.
Control was the most difficult piece of the puzzle. Lilienthal had tried to maneuver his glider by shifting his body weight, but died doing it. Others had designed machines with an upward-angled wing, believing that was the key to control. Because the brothers were bicycle makers, they looked at the problem differently.
Knowing how to ride a bicycle requires very good balance. You become one with the machine, and the Wrights realized that one of the secrets, one of the things that had to be solved to fly was to maintain balance and control in the air.
Wilbur began watching birds in flight, noticing how they banked and turned. He had an idea that the secret of their control lay in the way they twisted their wingtips. One day at the bike shop, Wilbur began twisting an inner tube box. It gave him an idea about how to achieve the control he wanted. Wilbur and Orville built a box kite and braced the wings with wires in such a way that they could be twisted in opposite directions to make the kite bank and turn. They called the principle wing warping, and it was a revolutionary breakthrough. In an empty field in Dayton, Wilbur tested his new design.
There were some group of schoolboys on the field where he was testing it, and they were kind of amazed that he could sort of dart down with the kite and then bring it back up again and control it so well. And it seemed a promising system, so the Wrights decided to go ahead and build a full-size piloted version of this kite in 1900.
Eager for feedback, Wilbur wrote to the man considered an international authority on aviation, Octave Chanute, and described in detail his groundbreaking ideas. "Dear Sir, for some years I have been afflicted with the belief that flight is possible to man. My observation of the flight of buzzards..."
Wilbur Wright was nobody, and Chanute was a highly respected figure, not just in the aeronautical community in the United States, but in Europe as well. He knew everyone who was engaged in aeronautical experimentation.
As Wilbur had hoped, Chanute promptly wrote back.
He did recognize that Wilbur and Orville Wright were clearly well ahead of everyone else when he got that first letter in 1900. Chanute had supported a lot of other experimenters and was familiar with virtually anybody of significance in the field, and quickly recognized that these two fellows were something special.